I will start believing that everyone can see me. Is any colleague able to confirm that for me?
Yes, we are on.
Lovely, amazing. Well, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. I would like to start by introducing myself. My name is Alice Delarguier, and I work for Equinet. And today I have the greatest pleasure of being your host for this workshop. I would like to thank all of our speakers for participating, for sharing with us their expertise and their thoughts, and to create a discussion around equality bodies contributing to National Roma Strategic Frameworks. So to give a little bit of a background around the subject, very recently, in January, the European Commission has issued the communication assessing the National Roma Strategic Frameworks, which will be used by national authorities, member states, to implement their own national strategy. And here, the role of equality bodies, which is the very discussion of today's workshop, is not only to support member states, but to raise awareness, to handle victims' complaints, to cooperate with grassroots organizations, and collect proper data to achieve Roma equality, inclusion, and participation. So before we start the workshop, I would like to remind some housekeeping rules and present to you Equinet's safe space policy. It might pop up at your screen at any moment, but to introduce that, we strive to keep a safer space. I can't see the PowerPoint on the screen. Yes, okay. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. So as per the safe space policy, this workshop should be a place where everyone feels welcome, comfortable to share their ideas and contribute. So we have a few rules, which is engage respectfully and peacefully, use inclusive language, respect people's identity and pronouns, be mindful of group dynamics, ask for consent before sharing anything, especially on social media, and share responsibility to look out for each other. Then I will present some Zoom guidelines, even though we're all used to it since COVID. I believe that's the next slide. So for Zoom, please rename yourself with your name, your organization, and your pronouns. As you can tell on this particular Zoom, you have a dedicated chat for the Q&A through which you can ask your questions to the speakers all throughout the workshop. Now, my colleague Chiara will share with you through this chat a link for a Slido to have a little icebreaker right after lunch. We all need to wake up a little and share some positive vibes. So whenever you see that popping in the chat and also on your screen, feel free to answer. Chiara, could you share the Slido on the screen, please? Wonderful. So you have the link in the chat. Please click on it and feel free to answer to the question. And answers will be popping up on the screen just any minute. So the question is, what are you most looking forward in 2023? Even though we're in March, let's have some nice resolutions and share together. As for me, it would be to exercise more or exercise even just a little bit. So let's see how that looks. Ooh, anti-racism, we have spring, we have parties, summer, end of the wars on a very much more serious subject, submit my thesis, combating anti-gypsyism, anti-racism, social justice, improvement, more peace, European Commission directives on equality. Thank you for that. Okay, peace and equality, justice, family holidays. Yeah, I get that as well. So thank you all for your very positive responses. It's just really nice. Everyone's really just participating. So today we are welcoming 8 speakers divided in 3 different sessions. The opening session will aim to set the scene and provide an overview of the EU framework. Then the first session will aim to discuss the implementation and monitoring of national Roma strategic frameworks from the point of view of civil society organizations, equality bodies, and European institutions. Then the second session will dive into the ways forward and good practices to carry out a comprehensive implementation of national frameworks with national authority representatives, equality bodies, and civil society organizations. So our opening session is providing, as I told you, EU framework. We will be talking about the assessment by the European Commission and Fundamental Rights Agency of the progress towards these goals. And therefore, I'm super happy and excited to welcome our first keynote speaker. Our first keynote speaker is Sybille Martin. She is Policy Officer at the European Commission within the DG Just in the Non-Discrimination and Roma Coordination Unit. Yes, Sybille, you are here. Thank you so much. I will now give you the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Alize, for that nice introduction. And good afternoon to all, and thank you very much for organizing this very important and timely workshop on the role that the equality bodies can play to make the National Roma Strategic Frameworks a success. So, as you say, you introduce me. I shall briefly introduce myself. So, I am. My name is Sybille Martin, and I am relatively new in the Roma coordination team in DG Justice in the Commission. But so it means I've been there for a bit more than a year, but I actively participated in the assessment of the National Roma Strategic Frameworks, which I will briefly present to you. So, but before coming to that, I will quickly remind you of the background and the main novelties of the EU Roma Strategic Framework for Equality, Inclusion and Participation, which was adopted in 2020, in October 2020. So there was a midterm review of the previous framework that ran from 2011 to 2020. And that midterm review established that the progress had been slow in Roma inclusion, and that there was a necessity to move from just the socio-economic integration in the 4 sectors of education, employment, health, and housing, towards a more comprehensive approach, which promotes equality, inclusion, and the participation of Roma. And member states, as you know, have adopted this approach by unanimously adopting a council recommendation on Roma equality, inclusion, and participation on the 12th of March, 2021. So they had been invited also to share their national Roma strategic frameworks by September 2021. So this new approach, equality approach of the framework, resulting in having 7 interlinked objectives, 3 horizontal objectives, the first one being anti-discrimination and anti-gypsyism, the second one being social inclusion, reduction of poverty, and the third one, meaningful participation of Roma in all levels of decision-making processes. And of course, the 4 sectoral objectives of education, employment, housing, health, and housing remained, but they have to be dealt with and addressed, having always in mind the necessity to combat anti-gypsyism and discrimination as one of the root causes, as for the lack of access to health care, to housing of the Roma. So to give you just an example of quantitative EU-level targets on discrimination that were introduced in this new framework, we want by 2030 at EU level collectively to achieve that we cut the proportion of Roma with discrimination experience by at least half. So this is a minimum, this is the minimum target. We want to ensure that by 2030, less than 13% of Roma experience discrimination. This is what it means. We want to decrease the proportion of general population who feel uncomfortable having Roma neighbors by at least a third. We want, and this is where the equality bodies come into play and are very important, to double the proportion of Roma who file a report when they experience discrimination. So we want to ensure that by 2030, at least 30% of Roma victims report discrimination. Of course, it's even much better if it goes beyond those targets, but these are really the important EU-level targets to be achieved by 2030. So notably, this new EU Roma Strategic Framework and the Council recommendation that followed provide for the involvement of equality bodies in structures set up to oversee the implementation, monitoring, and review of national Roma strategic frameworks, as you just quite rightly explained, Alize. So coming to the assessment of the national Roma strategic frameworks, we looked very much as to how the member states had reacted to the novelties, how they had responded to the novelties of the new framework. So whether they had measures to address anti-Gypsies and discrimination, whether they had measures, a proper mainstreaming of Roma inclusion across policies, but also targeted measures for Roma combined with this mainstreaming. Very important aspect is the mobilization of EU and national funding sources to support Roma equality. And of course, we looked also at the partnership and institutional capacity. So at the capacities of the national Roma contact points at equality bodies and Roma civil society organizations, and at how the member states had really strengthened their monitoring mechanisms. So the overall goal of our assessment was to determine whether we are on track with the national Roma strategic frameworks, which we have now, whether we are on track to achieve our objectives that are defined in the EU Roma framework. So, of course, we carried out this assessment exercise together with all the relevant services in the Commission. So, all our colleagues involved in funding and programs in DG employment, Regio, Santé, in education, of course, to name but a few. We carried out extensive consultations on the coherence between the strategies and the funding instruments. We involved very much in our assessment the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, the FRA, in assessing targets set by member states and the usage of indicators, because the portfolio of designing a portfolio of indicators was also the novelty, a key novelty, to have meaningful indicators that can help measure and monitor progress was a key novelty of the framework. And we also inserted feedback from the EU civil society monitoring, who drafted for us a summary of the national Roma strategic frameworks, which we included in the staff working documents accompanying the communication. So Coming to the national strategies themselves, you can imagine that we had to deal with very different documents, and we expected that because not all member states are in the same situations, and this aspect of the common but differentiated approach is also we also used it in our assessment. Because we gave in the framework more ambitious commitments to the member states with special, issues and challenges, and especially with a significant Roma population. So by significant, we mean more than 1% of Roma. And those member states were required to make additional efforts, especially institutionally, to have and regarding to have strong national Roma contact points with a broad mandate, decision mandate to decide on funds, and also they had particular, the task of really fighting very much against segregation in education and housing. So what we found is that most member states have actually responded, have made significant efforts to align their national Roma strategic frameworks with the Council recommendation. Most member states have developed measures to combat discrimination, hate speech, and hate crime, and to some extent to fight anti-Gypsyism. And furthermore, we have some measures we find in member states that aim to systematically involve equality bodies in Roma equality. And some member states having measures to promote positive narratives about Roma people and Roma role models. Or most member states have put in place a monitoring and reporting mechanism coordinated by the national Roma contact points. And as well as Roma civil society organization, ministries, equality bodies, and national statistics institutions. So these are the overall response or positive aspects which we found. However, we found that more effort was needed in some key areas. And so we delivered special guidance with messages to member states to call on them to pay particular attention and to be a bit more ambitious in the following areas. And the first one is the national Roma contact points. They play a very important role, of course, in coordinating and implementing the national strategies and in maintaining a dialogue with Roma civil society, and involving in making sure that there is a meaningful Roma participation. We found that some really had an adequate broad mandate, but even in the member states where the mandate is broad, especially in the member states with a larger, more significant Roma population, we found that there was no reinforcement of the national Roma contact point in terms of staff and resources. So we asked member states to look into this. Regarding anti-Gypsyism also, we issued a specific call to member states to go a bit further. As I said, there are many measures to be found against discrimination. In many strategies, the anti-Gypsyism is acknowledged, but it's not always followed by relevant measures, and it's not always or not enough, really. Applied in a cross-cutting way, in a horizontal way, throughout the four sectors. When we found measures for access to healthcare, for example, then suddenly there is little mention on how the fight against anti-gypsyism could help in access to healthcare. That's an example. Regarding participation, we saw in the National Roma Strategic Frameworks that they had been in the drafting of the strategies, an involvement of Roma civil society, of Roma organizations, or pro-Roma organizations. However, is not always followed through. Then, I mean, the participation of Roma should really go beyond drafting the strategy. It must be followed through at implementation level. And this is a message that we want to pass on also to member states. Regarding funding, which is a major, very important aspect, we don't always find that the measures are budgeted. So I mean, maybe they are, maybe member states know what amount will be allocated, but it's not always obvious in all strategies. So we really sent a strong message to member states to really avail of all the funding available, EU funds, national funds, because there have been massive investments in the past and we haven't seen much progress. So we don't want to see this again in this decade. We want to make sure that the funds are used. Now, I was mentioning segregation, which is a particular issue, particularly an issue in member states with larger Roma population, but also in other member states. All those member states with a larger Roma populations have included measures to prevent segregation in education and housing. However, in some cases, the proposed measures don't always have baselines and indicators and targets, and don't seem ambitious enough to match the scale of the challenge. So this is where we also call strongly on member states to step up the ambition. So these are really the main messages that we delivered in our assessment. Now, how can equality bodies contribute in the implementation phase? Alisa, you already introduced this in your introduction. Beyond their role to pursue cases of discrimination, hate speech, and hate crimes, and strategic litigation, equality bodies have a very important role to play, which is outlined in the Council recommendation in addressing underreporting of discrimination, in very importantly, conducting research into and collecting data on equality and discrimination against Roma. This is very, very important because we lack data. We don't have enough data. And it would be really, it would be a game changer if we had more data, more on equality and the discrimination against Roma to serve as a baseline to improve the situation. And of course, equality bodies can also build the capacity and cooperate with Roma civil society. As you said, Alisa, they can raise awareness and build a strong partnership with the national Roma contact point. We want also to encourage equality bodies to engage with the Fundamental Rights Agency for support, for monitoring, reporting, evaluation, reach out. And with this, I think I just open the path to the next participant, the next panelist. So I thank you very much. I hope I answered your expectation, but I am open to any question you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sibylle. Indeed, you open the path to the next speaker, as well as providing the European Commission point of view and presenting the assessment report and the overall progress and perhaps future goals. So now we can, I think, move on to our second keynote speaker. His name is Jaroslav Klink. He is a project officer at the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights in the Unit for Equality, Roma, and Social Rights. He has over 20 years of expertise regarding Roma inclusion and Roma rights, and he has been working for FRA since 2014. Jaroslav, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So as I was introduced, yes, I'm working at the Fundamental Rights Agency, where I'm managing the Roma surveys. Actually, also previously, a big majority of the data on Roma, which are available at regional level in Europe since 2004, went through my hands. So today I would like to present some of the results from the most recent survey that FRA has conducted on Roma in 2021. I noticed in the participants list that there are many people from civil society organizations, from the National Roma contact points. So I believe that most of you have already listed through the report, and you should be aware of the results which we presented in that report. So I will not stop for very long with the results. There are a few points, however, which need to be mentioned, which could be read somewhere in the report, but mostly people somehow do not notice them. The main objective of the report and of the survey was to collect data on the situation and life experiences of Roma in selected EU countries, plus few candidate countries, in order to populate the monitoring indicators for the EU Roma Strategic Framework. This means that, yes, much more areas could have been covered by the survey, but the main objective was to populate headline and secondary indicators in the portfolio of indicators for monitoring the EU Roma Strategic Framework. This is very important to keep in mind when people are asking why this aspect is not covered, that aspect is not covered, other aspect is not covered. The survey was covering selected countries, which account for about 87% of Roma in the EU. This is based on the Council of Europe, yes, outdated estimate, but still being used by all the relevant policy institutions: Croatia, Czechia, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Portugal, Romania, Spain, and 2 candidate countries, North Macedonia and Serbia. In total, we did almost 8,500 interviews. And in addition to these 10 countries, the report and also my presentation is including results for Bulgaria and Slovakia, where the similar surveys were implemented by national statistical offices, and FRA was supporting their effort. The survey results are representative as much as the information which we were able to retrieve on the Roma population, the numbers where they live geographically, were accurate. This needs to be kept in mind. It is comparable with the previous surveys which were done in these countries on Roma, especially EU survey on minorities and discrimination from 2016. But with Roma survey in 2021, it looks that the sample was covering much broader population, meaning not only those who are living in segregated areas, but also trying to go and reach to those who are living more integrated among the non-Roma population. When you see the comparison between 2021, the most recent survey, and EU MIDIS 2016, please, if there is a difference of less than 5 percentage points, do not regard this as a change. This is simply due to the characteristic of the survey, that it is a sample survey, and the sampling error, it means the way how the respondents are being selected is accounting for this roughly 5 percentage points difference. We also need to keep in mind that the survey was implemented during COVID-19 restrictive measures, which influenced both the difficulties and delays which were accounted, but also many of the responses are influenced by that fact that people were either locked in their houses, or they were victims of very strong restrictive policies. This we can see especially in the area of education, but also in the area of employment and anti-Gypsyism. In the slides which you will have available, you will see the respective EU target for individual objective and the results for individual countries covered. When it comes to anti-Gypsyism and discrimination, we think that based on the data, EU member states should continue their efforts to fight anti-Gypsyism and discrimination against Roma if they want to achieve the target by 2030. Actually, the situation in 21 in comparison to 2016 haven't changed. 1/4 of Roma on average have been victims of discrimination because of being Roma in the past 12 months before the survey. When it comes to reporting the incidence of discrimination, this is what Sibyl was mentioned in her speech, that could be a role for equality bodies. We don't see any improvement when it comes to the share of Roma who felt discriminated and reported it. Rather contrary, only 5% of Roma reported the last incident of discrimination. However, slightly optimistic note, every second Roma was aware of equality body or ombudsman office or national human rights institution in their country, which is much more than what we observed in 2016. This, however, does not translate into reporting the incidence of discrimination. This goes hand in hand with the lack of trust to institutions, which we also have reported in our report, but I don't have it in this presentation. When it comes to poverty and social exclusion, the EU member states, but also the candidate countries, are far from reaching the targets set for the proportion of those who are at risk of poverty. Again, 80% of Roma in the EU member states covered by this report live at risk of poverty. It means below the poverty line, 60% of median income in their country. When it comes to severe material deprivation, it is slightly better than in 2016, but still every second Roma lives in severe material deprivation. When it comes to children, situation is no better, rather worse. We see higher share of children living at risk of poverty in the households which are at risk of poverty than in case of general Roma population. And when we compare it with general population, the difference is huge, simply huge. There is no need to say anything more. When it comes to education, we think, or the data are indicating, that substantial efforts need to be made to achieve the EU Roma framework education objectives and targets by 2030. We see that a similar proportion of children from age of 3 up to the age of starting compulsory primary education attend early childhood education and care, like in 2016. So roughly 4 out of 10 Roma children, while in general population it is almost every child. When it comes to the completion of at least upper secondary education, again, every 4th Roma has achieved, aged 20 to 24 years, has achieved upper secondary education. Huge difference vis-a-vis general population. When it comes to the segregation, which is of a huge concern for not only European Commission, but also many non-governmental organizations, we see increase in the proportion of children aged 6 to 15 who attend schools where all or most of the pupils are Roma. This is an indication of continuous segregation in education, despite of legal actions which equality bodies are doing, which European Commission is doing against individual countries. So it really requires some further thinking how to make this diminishing. When it comes to employment, also the situation hasn't changed between 2016 and 21, with 43% of people aged 20 to 64 being in paid work. We see huge gap between Roma men and Roma women, when on average every third Roma women is in paid work, while in the case of Roma men, it is 2/3 of Roma men. We also see that Roma youth needs to be paid attention when it comes to employment, because we see that 56% of young Roma people, 16 to 24 years old, are neither in employment nor in education or training. It means that they are not in any activity which is somehow promising to have better life in the society. When it comes to health, the Roma survey managed to collect data necessary for estimating life expectancy, but it confirmed some of the partial information we had about life expectancy of Roma population, that it is on average 11 or 9 years shorter than in case of general population, women and men. When it comes to housing, there are some improvements in Roma housing conditions, but many Roma still live in overcrowded conditions, which makes it quite difficult to achieve this target. We see that every second Roma lives in housing deprivation, which is some improvement vis-a-vis 2016, but 82% of Roma live in overcrowded households, which is similar to what we observed in 2016, and which is a huge difference vis-a-vis general population when it is only 18%. Still, 1/5 of Roma do not have tap water inside their dwelling. So we can say that how can these people be prepared for going to a job or to a school if they do not have running water inside their dwelling? How they can have a healthy life if they cannot have tap water inside their dwelling? And this is quite serious issue, that in the EU countries we still have a huge proportion of Roma who do not have access to this basic amenity, drinking water inside their dwelling. In 2021, we collected this data, which I presented, and we have published all the results online, including the survey questionnaire. And just today, we also published the information about how the data were collected in technical, quite detailed technical report. FRA will also publish all the data, either as online data explorer for simple access to individual variables which were collected in the survey, or we will publish also entire microset dataset in the GESIS data archive later this year. At the same time, we are already preparing for the next wave of the survey. For the moment, it looks like only Slovakia and Croatia will be repeating similar exercise in their national circumstances. And for other countries, FRA needs to see if it will be possible to collect this data if we don't collect data, we cannot measure the progress. We cannot assess whether the countries have been progressing or moving somewhere vis-a-vis what they promised in their National Roma Strategic Frameworks. And the countries cannot do corrective measures in case those adopted in the National Roma Strategic Frameworks do not bring necessary positive change. National data collections on Roma is something what FRA heavily promotes because the regional survey cannot capture country-specific issues. The regional survey focuses only on the EU headline and secondary indicators, and we cannot cover across individual countries such country-specific issues which are relevant only for one or two countries. Implementation of sample surveys by national statistical offices is ideal, but it could be done also by some other implementers. But statistical offices, they guarantee the quality. And we can see this from our cooperation with Bulgarian Statistical Office, Slovak Statistical Office, which we would highly recommend also for other countries. However, the Roma survey as a sample survey is only one source of data. There are also other sources of data for monitoring National Roma integration, National Roma strategic frameworks as well. These are the complaints registers, either from police, courts, or equality bodies. These are the monitoring systems for monitoring EU funds. These are other qualitative and quantitative researches which are being conducted in individual countries. And as Sibyl mentioned, FRA is ready to support all these efforts in individual countries when it comes to methodology, to questionnaire developments, calculation of individual indicators, so that we can have comparability across the EU countries. And also when it comes to quantitative or qualitative data collection methods. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yaroslav, for shedding light, first of all, on the importance of data to monitor the progress of national frameworks, but also thank you for showing real figures and real data of how discrimination against Roma is present in every area and every aspect of life. And I think it's very important to remind it. And also, thank you for reflecting on how equality bodies could help monitoring National Roma Strategic Frameworks and collecting data. Now that we have set the scene almost perfectly, we can, I think, move on to our next session. So this session is about implementing and monitoring National Roma Strategic Frameworks. This session, therefore, will look at the design, the implementation, the monitoring, but also cover the obstacles encountered and the needs for Roma communities. So please, I would like to remind that at the end of the session, there will be a Q&A. So you can use the chat specifically dedicated for that on your screen to ask your questions to our speakers, and we will cover that at the end of the session. So our first speaker is Romeo Franz. He is a German MP, part of the Greens and the European Free Alliance, and he is the first Romani MEP who developed a resolution asking for EU law for the equality, inclusion, and participation of Romani people in combating anti-Gypsyism. So, Romeo, the floor is yours.
Hello, dear all. Discrimination and anti-Gypsyism against Romani people still remains commonplace all over Europe. In the past, the European Union launched with the National Roma Strategic Frameworks a political approach to tackle those problems. But why are we talking about Roma strategic frameworks? Although we want to address a large and diverse minority, we are not only Roma. We are Roma, we are Sinti, we are Calais, Manouche, Calderasha, Lovara, Rizande, and more who belong to the Romani people. As you can see, Romani people are a very diverse minority that cannot be reduced on the term of Roma people. In the future, we should use the inclusive term Romani people because it incorporates all the different groups of our minority and reflects our cultural diversity. So let me underline the term Roma people as a paternalistic perception that is not chosen by the minority itself. This is a clear indication of the paternalistic approach of the Commission. The use of the inclusive term Romani people is important because it is chosen by the minority. This is a matter of the right of self-determination. As diverse as our minority is, as diverse are also the challenges of Romani people face in different member states of the EU. That has to be considered when it comes to European legislation. Furthermore, the National Roma Strategic Frameworks have a recommending character. But if we really want to fight discrimination and anti-Gypsyism against Romani people, we will need a hard law approach, a law that includes sanctions for member states not willing to act against racism in a proper way. We can learn from the course of action the EU has taken in the past regarding the equal representation of women in executive positions in the private economy. For years, we had a soft law in use. Nothing really happened, nothing. But then we converted in a hard law with effective sanctions, and we could see an increase of women in executive positions. So let us adopt this political approach when it comes to ending the discrimination against Romani people. So what can we, as a European Parliament and political representatives in general, do to ensure an effective implementation of the National Roma Strategic Frameworks and legislation beyond that? An important point would be to create an ombudsman or an ombudswoman dealing with the Romani people related issues. This would effectively help to guarantee the implementation of the NRSFs and further legislation. The European Parliament also demanded this recently in an official report coordinated by the EMPL Committee. Since May 2022, Germany has its first official commissary for anti-Gypsyism, and even in this small amount of time, we could see an increase of awareness for discrimination and racism against Romani people within the population. The national equality bodies in member states should play a more important role when it comes to tackling anti-Gypsyism. To ensure this, the Commission proposals to enforce European minimum standards for equality bodies are crucial. We need to expand the mandate applicable for the equality bodies. So it would also include the directive on non-discrimination on grounds of religion or belief, disability, age, or sexual orientation in the workplace, and the directive on equality between women and men in social security. This expansion, stated in Article 1, would mean to set up a holistic fundament for equality bodies. Essential is also Article 3, giving the required independency to the equality bodies so they can fulfill their tasks without any external influence. This is crucial when the equality bodies should comment on national legislative proposals in matters of discrimination and racism, We need to make sure that no political influence can undercut this competence given to the equality bodies. To ensure their tasks, the equality bodies need appropriate resources. Article 4 guarantees this access and is therefore a key article in the given proposal. Supporting victims, especially the possibility to pursue a case in court, is important to make sure that victims affected by discrimination receive the help they really need. Article 6 to 9 constitute an appropriate legal basis for this. We need to make sure that both legislative proposals get adopted quickly. This would mean a milestone in the fight against discrimination, racism, and anti-Gypsyism. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Romeo. First of all, for reflecting on the role of the European Parliament and political representatives in general in ensuring an effective implementation of National Roma Strategic Framework, but also thank you for suggesting contribution for equality bodies, highlighting how they could be extremely important and also how standards for equality bodies could help them to have a broader mandate and therefore tackle more grounds of discrimination. I think it's very important. And it's interesting you mentioned that because our next speaker is working for an equality body. Our next speaker is Susanna Pavlikova. She is the head of the Policy and International Affairs for the Slovak National Center for Human Rights. She is a lawyer and she has over 10 years of experience in the field of human rights and protection from discrimination. Susanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alize, for such a kind introduction. I will just make sure to share my screen. Good afternoon, everybody. I was asked to share our experience as equality body. How do we engage with the National Roma Strategic Framework and also the opportunities that we were able to identify for equality bodies. Before I go into details, I will just give you a very brief overview of the National Roma Strategic Framework here in Slovakia. So currently it is driven by the strategy of equality, inclusion and participation of Roma until 2030, which was adopted by the Slovak government in 2021. Following the objectives introduced by the Speaker for the Commission, also the Slovak framework is implemented through action plans that can be divided, and you can see here how the objectives, horizontal and thematic, are mirrored in the action plans. So we have 5 action plans. It's the action plan for education, for priority area of employment, housing, health, and the last one is a bit more complex as it is focusing on combating anti-Roma racism and supporting participation. The first cycle of these action plans covers the period of 2022 to 2024, so it's now ongoing. The coordination, monitoring and evaluation has been given to the Office of the Plenipotentiary of the Government of the Slovak Republic for Roma Communities. I'm not sure if anybody of them is participating today in the workshop, but I know that they have been invited. And this framework followed the previous strategy for Roma integration by 2020, which was rather criticized by the European Commission, as it was not really easy to monitor and measure the progress and the indicators and baseline that was set up by Slovakia in this framework was very vague and very hardly monitored. And now, more practically, what is our work and experience on engaging with this framework? We participated in the participatory process that led to adoption of thematic action plans. We were involved in the working groups that covered different objectives and were able to help identify the measures that should be proposed for each of the priority areas. Also to comment on the draft action plans. And then what was very crucial, we were invited for bilateral exchanges with the coordinating entity, with the Office of the Plenipotentiary for Roma Communities, where we were able to more closely elaborate on the tasks that were vested upon our equality bodies under this action plan. Also to identify the indicators for fulfillment and fundings for the different sources of funding for these activities. This then was mirrored in our leadership or ownership of particular measures under different action plans. For example, measures that focus on raising awareness of different stakeholders, including, for example, medical personnel, judges, or also general public, students and the youth on different real issues such as Roma equality in general, but also more specific issues, for example, discrimination of Roma people in education or in employment and how to target it. So we have, for example, task on that is specifying how we should engage in trainings for employers and employees, for different stakeholders on Roma discrimination in employment. And some of the tasks are given to us separately. So we are the only entity that is responsible for their implementation, but in some tasks we are cooperating with different entities, for example, with the Ministry of Employment or the Office of the Plenipotentiary for Roma Communities. And when it comes to cooperation, we are sometimes leading the cooperation, sometimes we are the cooperating entity. As I said, the monitoring and reporting is vested upon the governmental office of the Plenipotentiary for Roma Communities, but we also use our own channels for reporting on the progress as we see it, and also on the process of adoption of this strategic framework. For example, within our rule of law reporting to the European Commission, or we use also alternative reports. For example, past summer, Slovakia was reviewed by the UN Committee for Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and we use the opportunity to talk with the members of the committee also on this about this strategic framework. As part of other activities, we cooperate with civil society organizations and experts that are involved in external monitoring. So, for example, we gave interviews to CSOs that are conducting external monitoring for the Commission. We provide information on our progress and also monitor legislative and policy measures that are being adopted under the action plans. And when we see that there is a possible impact on equality, but also on human rights of Roma, then we use our right to submit comments within the commentary process. As an example, in last year, in 2022, the government proposed a creation of a government council for inclusion of marginalized Roma communities, but we saw that the membership of this council is rather limited and there was not enough participation of Roma representatives of Roma CSOs. So our comment was to include 5 more experts coming from Roma CSOs, but also experts from academia that focus on Roma equality and inclusion, and also a representative of our center as equality body. This procedure was still not closed, so we don't know the result, but this is our aim to ensure broader participation of representative CSOs also in policy formation. What we identified as opportunities for national equality bodies with regards to these National Roma Strategic Frameworks is to, as I said, advocate for broader participation, not only at preparation, but also at implementation of different measures under the Roma Strategic Frameworks, so that Roma are represented, but also different groups that can be more vulnerable to intersectional or multiple discrimination, such as Roma women or Roma that belong to other national minority. In Slovakia, it will be a Roma that belong to Hungarian minority. Also, we believe that national equality bodies, and it was also in our case, have a great say in the preparation, but also monitoring and evaluating. Either they can be included in the external expert evaluation, but they can also use their own monitoring activities and reporting activities to bring attention on how they assess the progress in implementation. They should promote engagement of civil society organizations in implementation and monitoring. To give you another example, we have been given the task to lead the activity under Action Plan for Health. That is a creation of platform to discuss cases of discrimination and human rights violations of Roma in the area of healthcare. We are leading this platform, and we cooperate on the implementation of this activity with the Office of the Government for Roma communities. And what we try to ensure is that the broader participation of CSOs in this platform is ensured, defining different NGOs that work on Roma equality and health, but also that work on other grounds of discrimination in the area of health that can somehow interact or intersect with Roma discrimination as well. And then this is something that we are exploring also at the moment, and it is to the role that equality bodies can play in monitoring horizontal conditionalities, such as compliance with the EU Charter, if tasks under our measures under National Roma Strategic Frameworks also are funded through EU funding, which is often the case. And the challenges that we identified in this process. First challenge is to establish effective cooperation with the entity that is mandated to evaluate and monitor the strategic framework, if this entity is not the national equality body, which is usually the case. In our case, the current cooperation is very effective, and for example, even next week we are meeting with the Office of the Plenipotentiary for Roma Community to discuss activities under action plans for the year 2023. What is more challenging for us is to understand the synergies between the National Roma Strategic Framework and other policy frameworks in the area of equality and human rights, if tasks duplicate, are codependent, or even sometimes the funding is allocated through different funds for the very similar or same activities. For example, when the same activity in education, to desegregate education, is fall under the National Roma Strategic Framework, but also under the recovery and resilience plans. So we need to, we're still struggling sometimes to establish these synergies and codependencies. And then financial and technical capacities to implement the tasks that are vested upon our institution and national equality bodies under the National Roma Strategic Frameworks. In our case, some of the activities are funded through, for example, Norwegian funds if we have related projects, but sometimes they are part of our general budgets. And if equality bodies are, we believe that if equality bodies are given too many tasks under the National Roma Strategic Frameworks without giving extra funding, then it limits their independence to establish different priorities and work also on different areas. So this was very brief. I hope that I was as clear as possible, and I will be very happy to answer your questions when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susanna. It was brief but comprehensive, so thank you for that. A lot of details, and thank you so much for shedding light on the role of equality bodies, which is very important, and you highlighted that very perfectly. Also, thank you so much for introducing the work of the Slovakian Equality Body and for sharing with us how equality bodies can be contributing to the implementation and monitoring of National Roma Strategic Frameworks. So now that leaves our last speaker for this session, Isabela Michalas. She is a Senior Advocacy Officer at the European Roma Grassroots Organizations Network. Her work overviews partly the EU Roma Strategic Framework for Equality, Inclusion, and Participation. She has extensive experience in the field of working for nonprofit organizations, non-discrimination, and minority rights. Isabela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alice, very much. Thank you very much for the kind invitation to our organization. And also, I would like to thank the previous speaker and also to greet them. Because I think already there has been a lot of things that have been said, and particularly to Zuzana from the Slovak Equality Body, because it really, it was like a very thorough analysis of the challenges, which are very much similar with what we have seen as well, but also with some of the opportunities where equality bodies can contribute. I will try, as I was asked, to provide just some thoughts and opinions, obviously a bit generalized. I apologize for this because a lot of the things have been said, particularly by the Commission when it comes to the evaluation of the current strategic frameworks. And so the feedback has more to do with the process of the design and the challenges within and how much they align with the needs of the Roma communities, as opposed to also the implementation and the monitoring stage. As we all know, this is yet too early to have such an assessment. I would start by saying that with the process started by the European Commission with the launching of the EU framework in 2020, we could see, and we already know, that there has been an unequal preparation process, or if you want, basis for the various member states in trying to align with the requirements that the Commission has put forward for them in, some would say, in a very limited time frame. And so that's why many of the countries have also been late in submitting their strategies. But at the same time, this unequal preparation had also to do with the fact that there were a lot of presumptions, if you want, or assumptions from the of the process. I would not say necessarily by the Commission, but of the process on the member states. So many of the governments didn't have the required data to create the baselines. And although FRA has stepped in, as the colleague from FRA mentioned, and they provided some data, this did not really did not apply to all of the countries, and also some of these data came a bit late for them. So already you can see that a lot of the strategies don't always reflect on the current needs of the Roma communities, and are based on some of the outdated data that they had, and also the fact that still countries do not collect disaggregated data by ethnicity. And so unfortunately, nowadays within the EU, although we speak about equality in general, not just for Roma, but also for other vulnerable and racialized minorities, we see that there is not an obligation for member states to collect data disaggregated by ethnicity and all the other protected characteristics, which creates a big problem. Also, in terms of obstacles, we could see that in terms of the NRCPs, we still have across member state quite weak NRCPs, with the lack of resources, capacities, and expertise that are required for them to be able to be successful, and not just to put forward ambitious drafts, but also to manage that their adoption is successful. So whatever it's put there and into the discussions with the various ministries, it gets to be agreed upon. And so even with the new strategies, we have seen that NRCPs in many of the cases have not been strengthened, and there are not specific measures that have been put in place within these strategies to address this crucial need. When it comes to the civil society, we see similar situations. There are still a lot of countries where we don't have strong Roma civil societies, or even pro-Roma civil societies, And there also a lack of transparency for civil society to also have access to the documents that were put forward by the governments in the preparation of the national strategies, but also for them to have the required expertise and skills to properly input on the various areas that were required under the new EU framework. And so there were, as I said, a lot of presumptions and assumptions that the member states have the tools to deliver all these ambitious strategies, particularly for the countries with a significant Roma population. And so the guidelines that the Commission has provided was definitely not enough, because although we would expect member states to be able to perform and to put in place mechanisms and tools, it seems that maybe what could have helped would be a process of mentoring, a process of technical assistance that could be provided to member states for them to be able to comply with the requirements much closer than they have done. And so the capacity of both, if you want, NRCPs and civil society still needs to be improved. And when it comes to the equality bodies, I would say that although there are so high expectations, and we can see from the example of Slovakia that they're very well prepared. Slovakia is one of the very good examples in many of the areas when it comes to the National Strategic Framework, consultation with civil society, knowledge and expertise, working groups and all of that. We don't have that across the member states. And so even for equality bodies, they don't always have the resources and the expertise to work particularly on this file, and therefore, because I'm jumping from maybe towards the end, and therefore I think that a very important tool going forward would be that both for the contact points, but also for equality bodies, there should be a mechanism of capacity building that is put in place. Whether it's technical assistance, and has to be somehow worked out through the current EU funding programming period, whether it is for a closer mentorship system by the Commission, let's say quarterly meetings with both equality bodies and contact points, to require them to provide progress reports, and then to also ask about the needs and try and guide them throughout the process. These are some of the things that I think are more probably feasible than going through the funding mechanism and try to adjust as we go along. Also, there should be some, because we can see that there has been and there is still a lack of clarity when it comes to processes and time scheduling when it comes by member states and where they are at with whether the design or implementation. And because many of the member states have not put in place concrete mechanisms of participation of civil society, it's basically things happen on an ad hoc basis, or whenever member states or NRCPs need something, then civil society needs to respond. And so because there is not this clarity, there should be put in place this sort of like schedule, timetable that is required from member states in like how are they going to engage with the civil society over the year, how are they going to engage with the stakeholders over the year through the national platforms, but beyond the national Roma platforms also, because not all the countries have also put in place such system. And we have mentioned before to the Commission, and it seems that this is something that the Commission is open to also create the possibility through the next serve calls for civil society to be able to organize national platform meetings. So not just be the observers or the invitees to the events, but also be the co-organizer, the ones that are engaging other stakeholders and are putting together the agenda and the concept. And so just going finally to some of the recommendations that maybe are more specific for the equality bodies, I would more or less mirror what Zuzana has mentioned, but also to say that in this context where there is not much clarity about process, governance, steps, for stakeholders in general, we feel that also there has to be a particular guidelines that from the Commission to the equality bodies. The Commission has created guidelines for the member states, but it hasn't actually created guidelines for the equality bodies, which actually kind of took away from the power that the equalities body would have had within the process. In some countries, they have been involved more. In some countries, they have been involved very little to none. And although within the guidelines for anti-gypsyism for member states, we can see there is a reference to the national equality bodies, it hasn't really been followed through. So a guidelines that it would be specific for equality bodies, I think would really help the equality bodies move forward within the process of implementation, but also will kind of force the member states to engage them more closely. But also what we can see from some of the equality bodies is that they don't have a dedicated resource person that works on the Roma strategies. Obviously, they work cross-cuttingly on a lot of the issues that the equality bodies have a mandate for, but it would be really useful to have a dedicated person that follows the national Roma strategies, follows the monitoring process of the implementation, is able to input on the progress, is able to provide data from what the equality bodies is able to subtract from their cases and so on, onto the implementation process. And we talked about before about the need for equality bodies to have their own shadow type report on the implementation of the fight against anti-gypsyism and discrimination to the Commission and obviously to the government. And also there has to be a much more input on the possibility of improving the legislative framework at national level when it comes to the area of discrimination, particularly when it comes to segregation in education, right? Because that would be the role. We see that in most of the countries, segregation is not being defined under national legislation. It is a problem many countries have, and equality bodies would have a great opportunity to work on it. And I would agree with Zuzana again that they have such a tremendous role when it comes to the monitoring of the horizontal conditionalities under the new EU funding period, and particularly to the discrimination of Roma within EU funding. It just makes sense because we have seen a lot of cases of discrimination within the use of EU funds, and that would be a tremendous role that they can play. I see, Alice, you put on your camera, which I guess it's time for me to stop. I'm here, so I'm definitely open to questions and provide more input on some of the processes and the obstacles within moving forward in the implementation and monitoring process of the national strategic frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabella. First of all, for sharing the challenges and gaps in the implementation and the monitoring of national frameworks. Thank you also for sharing recommendations and also the practices to improve and progress in the implementation of National Roma Strategic Frameworks. Thank you for conveying the voices of civil society organization while making the link of potential cooperation with national equality bodies. So thank you so much for this comprehensive presentation. Now we will have a Q&A followed by a much deserved coffee break. So I will dive in first of all with our first question received from Thomas from the European Public Health Alliance. So the question is, after the member states update their national Roma strategic frameworks, how will the Commission continue to monitor the progress of these strategies throughout this decade? So if Sylvie, you'd like to answer to that question?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me? You cannot see me anymore. Okay.
Very well.
Sorry, my okay. I guess you can see me now. Yes, of course. I mean, we haven't finished our work with assessing the National Roma Strategic Frameworks. We really want to now work with member states, both bilaterally and also collectively, to really on the areas which we identified, which I listed to you earlier, and which we identified in our assessment as requiring more effort. So there will be further reporting. Member states are supposed to report on the implementation of their strategies, and then we will ourselves produce, I mean, continue to monitor and produce reports on the implementation. And we will, of course, not let member states. We have twice a year meetings with the national Roma contact points. We will have one in 1 month to discuss the challenges identified, to start this discussion, and to gather feedback from the member states and what are their intentions to address the gaps or the shortcomings we identified. But then, of course, there is again, I'm turning to Yaro from FRA, because there's again much to be gained. We really encourage member states to avail of the possibility to have the support from the Fundamental Rights Agency to develop indicators, because this we found, the indicators used in the strategies we found to be not concrete enough, not to be oriented towards the outcome. And going by such indicators right now will make it difficult for us to measure the progress. So it is fundamental for member states to develop better indicators and to set targets, because in some member states, even very important member states with high challenges, we don't see that there are targets being developed, and this is a work where we will continue to work closely and not to let the ink dry on our communication, but really to continue the work with the member states, and every second year to produce an implementation report to steer the member states.
Thank you, Cyril, for answering this first question and starting off the Q&A so well. We've had all throughout the beginning of the workshop 2 hands up, and I believe it would be nice to give the mic to these 2 people. So the first person who raised their hand was named Pietro. I think Michael Litaris will be able to give you the mic and ask you a question aloud, if you'd like.
No, thank you very much. They answered to my questions, so perfect. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. I mean, this is the whole point of this workshop. I think we can then give the mic to the other person who raised their hand. The name was Stanislawa. Would you like to ask your questions to our speaker? I don't know if you see your hands are still raised, but we cannot hear you. Would you like to give it a try? Okay, I think we have a bit of a technical issue.
Maybe she can write her question in the chat.
Yeah, most definitely. Would you like to write your question down in the Q&A? What we're going to do, so this is efficient and everybody can speak. Stanislawa, I will let you write down your question in the Q&A part, and I will move on to another question that was asked. It's, oh, I did not see that my hands were, it was a mistake. Well, it's totally okay. So no worries. So yeah, no, we had an anonymous participant question that was a bit large, and I think we can narrow it down. The question was about equality data and how we lack equality data. I think we can narrow down this question and maybe turn to Fra's point of view on how national authorities should be collecting equality data and why it's so important, and maybe dive into an equality buddy perspective on how to collect data and how you could support that. Would that be okay?
Yes. Actually, what I wrote in my response to this question about how to address the lack of data, I used the example from Slovakia. Slovakia, because also in my previous work, working for the UNDP, we were part of the process of discussion about collecting data and information about Roma since early 2000. And it took sustainable and continuous dialogue with all stakeholders, both the government representatives, civil society organizations, academia, the political representatives of individual Romani groups, throughout these years to get to a conclusion that it is important to collect the data, to collect information, various types of information. And currently, Slovak Office of Plenipotentiary is collecting the sample data on the situation of Roma, is collecting information about the situation in individual Romani communities funded from public funds, not from international donors as it was before, but from the national budget. Yes, big portion of it is coming from the EU funds, but the bottom line is that there is a mutual agreement of all the stakeholders that such data collections are important. There is a huge pool of people, not only non-Roma people, but Romani people as well, who are trained, well-equipped with all necessary methods to collect quality data. I mean, good quality data, not equality data, but good quality data. And they could be very well employed by commercial survey companies, which basically do this guarantee with their names, the whole data quality. It took about 15 years. So it takes time, it takes money, it all is there, but it all requires the will of political representatives in respective institutions. And unless you reach this will of the representatives of institutions, of stakeholders, you can't really do much. And achieving or getting this will takes some time, continuous dialogue, open dialogue, cooperation. So if you put all this together, then you can start collecting the data on sustainable way. And until then, I will be collecting data in some countries for which we have money, and we will stay available to provide any kind of methodological support to those who would like to do this on their own. And it could be not such a huge scale survey as Fra did. It could be a smaller scale research on individual topic, discrimination. It could be access to education, access to employment, health, whatever. To do it in a way so that it could be recognized, it could be comparable with the data which is being collected for general population. Because this is how we can also illustrate that there is something unjust done vis-a-vis certain population, vis-a-vis Romani population. If we compare their situation, their access with the situation of general population in their country.
Thank you, Yaroslav. As mentioned before, Susanna, would you want to give briefly, before our coffee break, the perspective of equality buddies on collecting data?
So, as Jaroslav mentioned, great work is being done in Slovakia by the Statistical Office, for example, at this moment. They were those that also collected data for the, and it was used in the most recent FRA survey. And we have been discussing our role in collecting equality data more generally when it comes to the new standards of the European Commission for equality bodies. These standards are proposing to give the coordinating role over coordinating all equality data collection to equality bodies, and we have been in discussion with the Ministry of Justice about the issue, and the position of our government is to give the member states the right to decide who they will let to coordinate the collection of equality data at the national level, while we understand that in some countries, Slovakia is one of the countries where a certain part of data collection is well done already. There can already be an entity that has all the skills to collect equality data. We still believe that equality bodies should be involved because we are the ones that will then need to report if the standards are adopted every 4 years to the Commission and also at the national level on the within this 4 years planned equality reports that are proposed by the directives. So we believe that the equality bodies should be involved in deciding which data should be collected at the national level with different kind of stakeholders, not only when it comes to Roma equality, but also when it comes to gender equality or other areas of equality. So we see a huge potential of the new standards, but we also believe that extra resources will be needed and will be needed to be given to the equality bodies to be able to take up on this robust new power and the responsibility that it comes along.
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you all, first of all, for these first amazing sessions, the opening one and the first session. Thank you to all of our speakers for sharing with us your expertise, your thoughts, for being so open to communicating and discussing all together. Thank you to our participants for following along and being so responsive. I am very glad to announce that this is the coffee break that we all want to have. It will last 10 minutes, so please join us again at 3:15, and there my colleague Danis Lewis-Tresio will take the lead of the event. So thank you so much and see you afterwards.
Welcome back to everyone, and welcome back to the workshop. I hope that the coffee is slowly kicking off, so we can have an interactive final part of the day. Thank you also for the music. Hope this cheers up the participants as well, as it did for me. And well, my name is Dars Lewis. I work as a legal and policy officer at Equinet, and I'm here to take over the good work done by my colleague Alice in hosting the first part of this workshop, where we have been able to listen already to some of our panelists discussing the policy and legal framework, and also to provide this perspective from different actors, from the European Parliament to the equality bodies, and also the European network, ERGO. So thank you very much for this first part. Now, our coming session will be zooming in on ways forward and good practices in implementing the National Roma Strategic Frameworks. We have included 3 excellent speakers, which we will start with the first presentation, which will provide us with a perspective of the work carried out by the Spanish National Roma Contact Point, and therefore bringing a new layer to the workshop. This will be followed up by a presentation from our Bulgarian member on their experiences also implementing the national strategy. And finally, we'll have a representative from a CSO which will share also with us their own perspective and insights, highlighting opportunities and successful examples, hopefully. And well, after these three presentations, we will have also time for another Q&A. So please don't miss the opportunity to post your questions and on the chat at any time from now, and we will come back to those questions. And but with further ado, I will now give the floor to our first speaker of the session. Is Lourdes Magaña de la Riva. She's she's an officer for the social program, Deputy Director General of Social Program, and in the Directorate General of Family in Spain, in the Spanish government, and she will provide us with some insights from the National Roma Contact Point there. Thank you, Lourdes. The floor is yours.
Hello, Darius, and hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having invited us and also for giving us this opportunity to share with you what we are doing in terms of equality on fighting discrimination and anti-Gypsyism here in Spain, linked to our National Roma Equality Framework. So I would like to start with some general data, which is the first slide, if I may. Thank you. So first, for you to have an overview of what we do in the Ministry of Social Rights and Agenda 2030, this ministry is responsible for the promotion and exercise at the state level of social rights policies. And the social rights policies, of course, include those which affect the Roma population. So because one of the main duties of this ministry is to develop policies that aim at the protection of the most vulnerable and disadvantaged groups. Among those, unfortunately, Roma people are still included. So the mandate of the ministry includes social rights and social welfare, family and family diversity, protection of minors, social cohesion, and of course, Roma equality and inclusion policies, among others. What we have seen is that discrimination is very much related to poverty and social exclusion. Indeed, for instance, also aporophobia is already included in the penal code as an aggravating circumstance. So we see that by developing adequate social rights policies, we can also contribute to lowering discrimination rates. And just for you to know that, well, I am working for the Deputy Directorate of Social Programs, which is included in the Directorate General for Family Diversity and Social Services, which is in charge of Roma policies. So, please, next slide, please. So, well, just for you to see about general data about Roma people. Well, we have an estimation of Roma people being like around 750,000 Roma people in Spain out of 47 million. But as I said, this is an estimation because as some of our colleagues before me, they have stated here at this meeting, we have a real problem to know exactly how much and also how many Roma people live in Spain, and also about having data about living conditions of Roma people, because still we do not have yet included the ethnic or racial origin questions in our national surveys. So for us, it's very difficult. It's a real challenge to have data and reliable data to do our monitoring exercise, and also to have the real picture of Roma people living in Spain. Well, we can track the presence of Roma people in Spain like already back in the 15th century. We have seen in the last decades an increasing relevance of Roma population and also Roma policies in our national policies. And what we have seen also is that the Roma people are more concentrated in urban areas than in rural areas. And also in some regions, for instance, we have a huge percentage of Roma population living in Andalusia, Valencia, Madrid, and Catalonia. And we have created in 2007 the Institute for Roma Culture. And this is important to highlight that the Roma people is not considered in Spain a national minority yet. So this also have consequences. So next slide, please. So when talking about our National Roma Equality, Inclusion and Participation Strategy, which was developed in 2021, designed in 2021, it was presented to the Commission in October after being approved by the Council of Ministers. So what we departed from an accurate diagnosis of the Roma socioeconomic situation, which started in the process of the evaluation of the previous strategy from 2012 to 2020. We kept well following the guidelines of the EU Roma framework. Of course, we keep the 4 sectoral sectors like education, employment, housing, and health, but also we have now already 3 transversal areas, which are equality and anti-gypsyism, participation and empowerment and social inclusion. So in terms of the fighting discrimination and anti-gypsyism, what I would like to highlight here is that for the evaluation process, but also for the design process as well, for now that we are trying to implement this strategy, the Ministry of Social Rights has a very close relationship with the Ministry of Equality, which is the main equality body here in Spain. So in this ministry, we have the Directorate General for Non-Discrimination and Equality of Treatment. And this Directorate General is fully involved in the design, the implementation, and of course, it will be as well at the monitoring and evaluation process. So we have also, well, in this framework, we have, of course, midterm and long-term goals, and then we have developed, following the FRA guidelines, indicators, and we have foreseen to have a midterm and final impact evaluation of this strategy. So also, as well as the national strategy, as you know, that Spain is a very decentralized state. We have also some regional and local Roma integration strategies in some of the autonomous regions. Next slide, please. So, as I said, well, we have in this strategy a strategic line on anti-gypsyism and not discrimination, but also for you to know, it's not just an individual goal, but it is also a cross-sectoral issue to be dealt with in all the sectoral and other objectives in the strategy. So this is very important for us because it has been a challenge to include in all the sectoral lines, for instance, in living, in housing and living conditions and education, because it is important to know that we are trying to include, for instance, the design of protocols to fight against discrimination and anti-gypsyism in all these sectoral, those sectoral objectives. So the work of this strategic line aims at reducing the experiences of discrimination that Roma suffers, and this is especially in very close collaboration with the Ministry of Equality, but also with other ministries, because it is not just through this Roma strategy, but we have also in Spain developed also an anti-racism strategy, and also we have now a law on non-discrimination, equality of treatment, which is quite important, and also new legal developments on fighting racism and, of course, anti-gypsyism. So what we try to have in this strategy concerning this issue is also to provide assistance and support to the victims, and contributed to the non-normalization of discrimination and fight against the existing underreporting. Because we have seen in the evaluation and also through studies is that Roma people, they have very normalized this kind of discrimination, and also they have problems in seeing or looking at this some behaviors as racist against them. So we think that it is very important to work on that. And also, of course, the underrooted factors of that is to fight the beliefs, the stereotypes, and prejudice of the general population against Roma people. So if we can go through the next slide, please. Thank you. So we have also this. We have also some accompanying measures to implement this strategy. So first, of course, we also work on with the application of the European recommendation, as also the Council of Europe. We also are working with other ministries in the production of materials and information against Roma discrimination. In this regard, we have developed together with the Ministry of Education has developed, in collaboration with the working group of the Roma State Council here in Spain, some materials for instance, education and for the scholar curriculums to tackle Roma discrimination and anti-Gypsyism. We are also looking at to establish regular courses or training for civil servants and key players, the establishment of extraordinary measures for Roma women. In this regard, we are also working very closely with the Ministry of Equality, with the delegation to fight against women violence, and also with the Institute for Women. We are also developing studies and reports on Roma population to see also to see how to better monitor and evaluate our policies. And also we have support programs of guidance and accompanying and legal advice to victims. So next slide, please. Also, well, in terms of financing the strategy, what we have is the Roma Development Plan, which is a plan that we do as national government together with the regional autonomous regions governments. So, and then it is the plans aims at developing projects of comprehensive and holistic social integration of Roma. In the last years, these plans has seen the increase of the funding from less than €500,000 to almost 2 millions. And then we also finance projects on Roma integration and Roma inclusion through the tax, the personal income tax. So from the 0.7%, which is a total amount to finance these projects. So next slide, please. Well, what we have also to work together with civil society here in Spain is our national civil society platform, which is the Roma State Council. And through this council, we try to promote and reinforce the effective and full participation of Roma. So we can go to the next slide, please. And this council, it has a very clear mandate to propose and advise on measures aimed at the promotion of Roma people, and also to address initiatives with the funding programs, and to collaborate and cooperate with similar councils that work in defending human rights, as well with what we will see after that. And then to canalize proposals from the Roma NGOs, and to promote communication and knowledge exchange between Roma community and general population, to formulate opinions. Well, this is the mandate of the Roma State Council, among others. So please go to the next slide. Well, the council, for you to know, is like it is formed by 40 members, and we have representatives from the ministries, like these are 20 representatives from the state administration, and then we have 20 representatives from the Roma civil associations. So the council is nominated for 4 years, and the last renovation was in July last year. And the NGOs are selected following a ministerial order, which is published by the Ministry of Social Rights in 2030, and the requisites are already negotiated with the previous council. So next slide, please. Well, the council structure will have a plenary assembly, and then the permanent commission, which prepares for this plenary assembly, which decides on whatever we have to decide. For instance, how to prepare the International Roma Day or the San Pen, or also, for instance, after what happened last year in Jaén, and I don't know, but several Roma families were attacked by general population families, and then the council, for instance, published a communication on this, condemning this kind of acts. And also the council has working groups which are focused on one aspect. And of course, we have a working group on equality and non-discrimination. Next slide, please. So now that I have explained a little bit on what we have more focused on Roma people, we are going through to this legislative framework on fighting against anti-Gypsyism and discrimination. And first, I would like to start with the legislative frame, because in the last years, we have seen some developments, important developments in Spain. For instance, we have discrimination now as aggravating circumstance since 2015, when the penal code was changed to have discrimination as this aggravating circumstance. And when talking about anti-Gypsyism, last year in May, it has been included in the criminal code as a special hate crime, similar, for instance, to anti-Semitism. So anti-Gypsyism is now, from now onwards, an aggravating circumstance, and it is punished with imprisonment from 1 to 4 years. And it has been achieved because of the 3 Roma Spanish parliamentarians, one from the Socialist Party, one from Ciudadanos, and the other one from Podemos. So it was approved in the Congress, except for Vox, the extreme right-wing party in Spain. So now,
sorry, Lourdes, I have to ask you to wrap up as soon as possible.
So then we can go to I think that what is left is about, we have the other equality bodies. If we can go to the next slide, please. Well, we have talked about this, so please next. Well, in terms of non-discrimination body, we have the Council for the Elimination of Racial or Ethnical Discrimination, that you have the main duties are similar, I guess, to others. And what I can say is that the Ministry of Social Rights is a member of this council. Next, please. And also we have a subcommission for the study of a state path against anti-Gypsyism and the inclusion of Roma people. It was also achieved last year, and also launched by these 3 parliamentarians. Next slide, please. And then we have a network of assistance of victims and other initiatives, but I can share the presentation with you, and then you can look at it if you want. So now I am open for all the questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lourdes. It has been a very comprehensive presentation, including the challenges that somehow posts do not have included Romani people as a minority, as a national minority. Then also, thanks also for explaining the different aims and goals that the strategy also includes in Spain. But also, we have seen some of the concrete good examples, I would say. Particularly, I noted the council, which is a rather positive tool to kind of have a more inclusive participation mechanism, in order to not only assess and monitor the implementation of the strategies, but also to make sure that new measures are implemented according to the needs of the Romani communities in Spain. I'm also quite curious about the last slides that you have quickly go through. So hopefully we will have all the time to go over with the PowerPoint that you share with us, and also important, is also the strengthening the legislation, in order to have effective sanctions in order to comply, and make sure that discrimination acts are or that the victims of discrimination have effective access to justice. So thank you very much again, Lourdes.
Thanks to you.
Yeah, we will move towards the next speaker. First, again, a reminder that we will have a Q&A, so please post your questions. I know that Mr. Franz, you have raised your hand. We will come back to you during the Q&A, so please keep your questions or comments for later. And now we will move on to the next speaker, Kirill Stankov. He is the Chief Specialist in Analysis, Prevention and International Cooperation from the Equality Body in Bulgaria, the Commission for Protection Against Discrimination. And yes, we are looking forward to hearing from your work, your experiences, and some of the concrete examples that you can provide us. So without further ado, thank you, Kirill. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'll take that as a yes. I was already introduced, so I'll just try to be brief and move to the point. First of all, a very brief presentation of the main objectives in the National Strategy for Equality, Inclusion and Participation of the Roma. It is very bare bones, but we try to keep it to the point and show our role as an equality body in all of this. We have the 3 horizontal objectives: effective equality, socio-economic inclusion, and meaningful participation of the Roma. And we have the sectoral objectives: increasing effective access to quality, inclusive education, increasing effective access to quality and sustainable employment, improving the health status of Roma, and increasing the access to quality health and social services, and also increasing effective access to adequate desegregated housing and basic services. To make these things more clear, they are further separated into 6 groups of priorities: education and training, healthcare, employment, housing conditions, rule of law, and anti-discrimination and culture. Of course, the Commission for Protection Against Discrimination, among many ministries and institutions, is responsible for the rule of law and discrimination priority. In short, for the Commission, for those who do not know us, we are an independent specialized body. Our main functions are preventative, protective, and control. It is important to note that we are very similar to a quasi-judicial body. We have different panels, each separated to include 1 or more of the protected grounds stated in the Protection Against Discrimination Act. The first panel specifically is on the grounds of ethnicity and race. And historically, it receives the most complaints concerning discrimination against people of Roma ethnicity. For those interested, I can further provide the statistics through the years. Next, moving on. During the draft of the national strategy, some of the suggested measures the Commission sent and decided to take responsibility for training of police officers on human rights and minority issues, of course, annual and other national and local seminars for police work with ethnic minorities. We think it's an important issue that should be looked on closely. We also want to conduct seminars and roundtables on the issue of equality of Roma women in Bulgarian society, engaging the Roma community in preventing human trafficking and caring for victims, developing a program for prevention, dealing with interethnic violence, tolerance for differences, and integration of Roma. And of course, raising the awareness of children and their families about the rights of the child. Now I will move on to some of the measures we have implemented that have given good results, or we hope will give good results in the future. One of the biggest contributors to the preventative functions of the Commission are the regional representatives. They are located in 24 of the 28 regions of the country, although I believe a few retired recently and their positions are still open. They are, of course, permanent members of their regional councils for cooperation on ethnic and integration issues. They actively participate in development and implementation of strategies, and they hold open receptions in Roma neighborhoods, which we think is very important as people from vulnerable groups, not only Roma, oftentimes have difficulties accessing the help they need. They, of course, provide independent and free assistance to any citizens. They consult them to tell them about the discrimination law and if their rights were violated in any way or not. This is a map of the regional representatives. And finally, one of the more important aspects of our work, we have the cooperation. We signed a memorandum with the Ministry of Education, because of which we have trained more than, I think, 1,500 directors of schools and teachers to work in multicultural environment. This is an open-ended agreement, and we plan to do a lot more of these types of seminars and training. We are, of course, the national contact point for collecting data on hate crimes for OSCE. We have good relationships and often participate in conferences and seminars with organizations such as the Association of Integro. The Just Rome 3 Problem has our chair lady as a speaker, and the Amalipet Center for Inter-Ethnic Dialogue and Tolerance, who have been very active the past year, have also been close partners of ours. On the planned police trainings I mentioned earlier, we are working with the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Education and Culture to organize it. Of course, we have to have the proper financing for this, but we are positive it will happen in the upcoming years. In connection with the seminars and roundtables on the equality of Roma women in Bulgarian society, we would also like to know that the regional representatives take active participation in national seminars, and when they can, in international. If they cannot, of course, we forward any information we can collect. And I try to be brief as possible. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kirill, for your presentation and for giving us some highlights about the extensive work that you do at the equality body. I highlighted your local level approach. I think that while emphasis has been commonly placed on on working at the national level, there is growing recognition that through this method, the needs of the local level actors but also citizens are not being met. So I think it's a very good practice to have a regional and local level representative that they can address these specific issues to the municipalities, and but also for the cooperation, not among with different actors and stakeholders. So thank you very much again, Kirill. We will move forward to our next and last speaker of the session. Is Atanas Stoyanov, a project manager at Firen Amenka, and will provide us with the insights and with the perspective of the CSO. Please, Atanas, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me well and see me. I don't know if, can you please confirm if you see me?
I think that you need to turn on your camera in order to be spotlighted, at least. And
right.
But we can hear you well. Thank you. Now we can see you and hear.
Yes. Oh, I even have this fantastic background. Okay. Sorry for the noise. You are catching me in The Hague, where we just had a talk with the Dutch Roma contact point. In this conversation, I want to talk to you first of all about who we are. I'm part of the Pirena Mensa International Network. This is a European Roma youth network that through the year involves more than 500-600 Roma participants in different initiatives such as the Soccer. We have the EU Roma Week coming. We have events on genocide remembrance and LGBT, and Roma girls events, and so on and so on. So Pirena Mensa took the responsibility of national coordinator for the Roma Civil Monitor for the Netherlands and for Belgium last year. And currently we are working with civil society organizations from the both countries on that. To the next slide. In my personal quality, I'm very much interested into the communication between national Roma contact points and the European Commission, mostly on how Roma contact points are reporting the progress on Roma inclusion from their countries. And recently, I mean, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I published this research on what makes a measure Roma relevant, where I interviewed different Roma contact points from different countries, the Netherlands, Romania, Finland, Greece, and Bulgaria. So I'm really much involved into the topic and very much interested on it. And the next slide. Yes, the consortium for the Netherlands includes 5 organizations. In January last year, we had a call for civil society organizations to join the Roma Civil Monitor. So from the Netherlands, we have the Romani Early Network, which is part of the International Step-by-Step Associations. We have Radio Patrin, Orhangaliush. We have Step Up for Youth, which is a youth organization based in Lelystad in the Netherlands. Jas Anglais, working with Roma children from Amsterdam. And Woonwagen, the Woners, people living in caravans. These are the organizations that joined our coalition. And for Belgium, as partners in the Roma Civil Monitor Coalition, we have Center for Integration Antwerpen, Balkan LGBT Brussels, CAM Brussels, ESMA, Charleroi, and REU Equipe, Roma European Union Equipe from St. Nicholas. So this is just a short brief of the organizations we are going to work on mostly from 2021 to 2025 under the Roma Civil Monitor project. further, to give more explanation, like in Belgium, we have the Roma contact point under the Federal Public Planning Service for Social Integration, while in the Netherlands, where we just had a meeting with them, this is the Ministry of Social Affairs and Social, I cannot read it well, but it's employment, social affairs and employment. So just to say that in both countries, the dialogue with the civil society organizations is not structured. This is so-called flexible, or I like to call it chaotic dialogue. Whenever we feel the need to consult Roma organizations and Sinti, this is when we have a dialogue in the both countries. Then the available, there is another specificity for both of the countries when it comes to Roma civil societies, that there is available funding, but no clarity on the objectives for it. For example, in the Netherlands, there has been these grants for remembrance for Roma and Sinti organizations. So they have never disclosed the information on how many organizations received what grants, and there was no financial reporting on it. So we see that there is like funding, but a lot of improvements can be done in terms of procedure and awarding. And then to connect to the topic of equality bodies, in all this process of consultation with Roma civil society, with National Roma contact points in the both countries, it is not really clear the involvement of the equality bodies in the design of the National Roma Strategy. Now, especially for the Netherlands, what I understood is that nobody even thought of inviting the equality body in this process, which is very much in contrast with the fact that main topic of the new Roma strategies is the anti-Gypsyism. So this is what we see. And again, overall lack of transparency. There is no information both for Belgium nor for the.
I think we have lost Atanas, if I'm not the only one. I don't think that I'm the only one, but yes. But
Am I back?
Sorry, are you back? Atanas, we can barely hear you. Can you? Yeah?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now. Yeah, we lost you for a few seconds. Thank you.
Yeah, so there is no transparency on which organizations and which institutions, most importantly, are involved into this dialogue about design and implementation of the National Roma strategies, both in Belgium and in the Netherlands. So this is what I can say for the moment as a coordinator for the Roma Civil Monitor for these two countries. And to continue further, next slide. Yes, the way.
I think we are losing you again, Atanas.
Yeah, yes. I'm really sorry. I'm going to switch off my video so maybe you hear me better. Yeah, so we need proactive equality bodies. We need equality bodies that are proactively seeking to participate in this process for design and implementation of the national Roma strategies, to proactively seek dialogue with Roma contact points, and to have a role in the reporting of this national Roma integration strategies, especially a role that is concerning the data on anti-Gypsyism, like whether the equality body is collecting such data or it does not collect such data. I know in the different countries, this might be different. Besides that, we need equality bodies that have also a bit active political role in adopting definition on a state institutional level on what anti-Gypsyism is. For example, this has been done already in the Netherlands last year, but we need this to happen also in many other countries. And we need Roma sensitive equality bodies. Like still, although equality bodies exist for already many years since the adoption of the Racial Equality Directive, and before that, there are lack of Roma employees in the equality bodies. A good step would be internship for Roma young professionals. We already see this happening. A good example is giving Equinet. But this should be happening actually in every member state, in every quality body, at least internship position. And we don't see that yet happening in many countries. Another dialogue that I see missing is the dialogue between the European Roma Rights Center, for example, as maybe the only Roma litigating organization. Like what I see from their work is that they don't turn to equality bodies because they think in their work that they are not effective. So how we can improve the work of equality bodies to be more effective for Roma. And here we are talking again about things that Equinet is working on for many years already, like whose is the burden of proof, who gets the remedy if something, if there is a case, is it the victim or the state? What is the access for a complaint? Is there an online access, or you have to go to a bureau and stamps and all these traditional bureaucracy forms? So these are all important things that that needs to be addressed entirely in the work of the equality bodies. And yes, to be facilitated the dialogue with the Roma contact points. This is what I wanted to say shortly on my side.
Thank you very much, Atana, for sharing your highlights and for your time, since you seems to be quite in a busy schedule today. I highlighted some of your points, like for instance, the need for further transparency at all the stages in the not only the design but also in the implementation of the national Roma strategies, and furthermore also how to somehow improve or what are the potential roles that the quality bodies can fill in the implementation of the Roma national strategies. Like for example, supporting in the adoption of definitions, but also in the collection of data, or assisting a victim of discrimination and take legal cases, which of course will depend on the capacities and the powers of the quality body and depending on the country. So thank you very much. I think that we had quite a comprehensive session, very insightful, with many examples and opportunities that the different speakers shared with us. And now perhaps we can move on already to the Q&A, since we are a little bit behind in the agenda. I have noted first one of our speakers, Mr. Romeo Franz, have a question. So I will directly ask my colleague to perhaps spotlight, the speakers of this session, and also Mr. Romeo Franz, so that he can ask the question himself. Thank you very much.
No.
Mr. Romeo Franz, I think, can you actually unmute and ask your question? Or I can directly also ask the question if there seems to be some technical issues. Well, I can go ahead with asking the question. This question is directed to you, Lourdes. His question is is referring to why the self-determination of the Calais in Spain is not respected, and the term Roma is used. Another second question, is the discriminating term Gitano still used by the ministry? And please, if you can answer, Romeo Franz, Lourdes, the floor is yours. Oh, sorry. I have actually, apparently there's another,
sorry.
participant. Yeah, sorry, Lourdes. There's a participant, Daniel, who is going to ask further the question, or maybe perhaps explain further the question of Romeo Franz. So, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Yes, I don't know how to turn on my camera. It's a problem, but never mind. I'm working for Mr. Romeo Franz, who had to already leave for another meeting he has, also regarding, oh yes, I can. Again, money issues, this time in Kosovo. And yeah, and Mr. Franz, first of all, would say thank you for this really good workshop, but he had one question or remark that he noticed that some of the speakers still use the term Roma people and not the more inclusive and correct term Romani people. So he wanted to remind the people who used Roma that maybe in the upcoming events and in the documents should adjust to Romani people in order to not exclude those Romani people that are not Roma but Calais, Sinti, etc. So yeah, that was the remark that I should make on Mr. Romeo Franz. But nonetheless, he is very happy with the workshop and hope that we can all work together more to tackle Romani issues in Europe regarding Roma, Sinti, Calais, and all other Romani people in Europe. Yes, thank you.
May I answer to the question? Thank you so much. And thanks to Romeo, even though he's not here with us for the question. Well, as far as I know, the term Calais here in Spain is not fully accepted by all Romani community. I think that maybe we should have a session on that with our Roma State Council. And we are very used to this term Roma when we speak in English. And to my knowledge, because when we work with the Roma civil society, they are not offended by the word Gitano, and they are not offended either by the term Roma when it is used. And we have some of the Roma civil organizations that we have working together with us in the Roma State Council. They also participate in the EU meetings that are conducted in English, and they are quite used to this Roma word, and they haven't complained about it. So for me, it is difficult to understand where it comes from, this question from Romeo, but still it might be that it is not in my knowledge sphere. So what I can do is to raise this question to our civil society organizations to see what they think about it. But for all the time I have been working in the ministry dealing with Roma issues, it is the first time I hear about this complaint. So I'm sorry I cannot be of more help, but I can try later on. Sorry.
Yeah, if Romeo would also be open if you want to meet in the coming days, and then he can explain a little bit more. For example, he is Sinti, so he is not Roma, but he's Romani. So therefore, for him, it is important to use the term Romani, which is inclusive to all different groups of Romani people, and not only Roma. And also to use Romani as a term to highlight also the differences in the cultures between the different groups. But yeah, I would just suggest we will write you an email, and then we can maybe set up a meeting or something if you want.
If I may, I would appreciate maybe that we can raise this issue to our national Roma contact points, because as you can see, all our language in the EU is about Roma and not Romani. So maybe we have to change that.
Yeah.
Because with DigiJust and with the coordination of Roma national contact points, the term we use is Roma. So sorry, I am kind of confused now. So I'm really sorry, but maybe this is an issue we can raise at our next meeting of the National Roma Contact Points, because this is the term we normally use. So I am quite confused about it. Thank you.
Yeah, so what I see here, perceive, is that definitely there is room to discuss the the terms and the language that we use, and what actually it is helpful is to bring all different speakers together now from different organizations, and to discuss this, because obviously there are different perspectives of perception of differences, not only at the national level but also at the European level. So I think that this is one of the points, not to have this type of meetings just to raise these issues and hopefully maybe to come to any conclusion. In this case, maybe we didn't reach a conclusion, but definitely we agree all that we need to discuss this further.
Thank you.
But yeah, and but otherwise, I don't know if perhaps if you want to jump in, Kirill or Atanas, if you want to add anything. Also, you are obviously welcome to add your opinion on this matter, because otherwise I will. Since I don't see any further questions or hand raised, I will move on directly to the conclusion of the event, because we are quite late in time, and we don't want to keep you for the whole afternoon. We know that you have also a lot of matters to attend. So thank you again. Thank you, Lourdes. Thank you, Kirill. Thank you, Atanas, for your time and for your presentation, and thank you to all the speakers during the day also, because this have been very, very rich. I also like it that you reacted to each other, to your different presentations and interventions, and that also you participate during the Q&A with your answers, questions, and reflections. And so I'm very happy that we invite you all here today. Thank you also for participants for being very engaged, and thank you for sure to the team behind this workshop, Equinet. They definitely did an excellent work as well. And as usual, we have shared actually an evaluation form in the chat, so that you can please fill in, because it's very important in order to improve our events. And before closing this event, I just going to give the floor to Subil, who is actually provide the final remarks of the event, and then we will we'll leave you to your matter. So thank you, everyone, and please, Subil, the floor is yours.
Darius, thank you very much. Yes, I mean, just before coming to the concluding remarks, I would like to tell Lourdes that the point is taken. Maybe we could briefly discuss, because at the upcoming National Roma Contact Point meetings on the terminology that we have agreed on. The agenda is packed, but we can briefly touch upon it and justify our choice. I don't think it's the first time that this discussion is brought to our attention. So yes, I really want to thank you very much. It is very very heartening actually to see to hear the example of the Slovak equality body being really involved in the design, in the implementation, in the monitoring, in the funding related to the Slovak National Roma Strategic Framework. And I would really second Isabella from Ergo to say that we know that it is not the case in every member state, and we would really want to see that more. Regarding having one person dedicated really in each equality body to following up on the National Roma Strategic Framework, it might not be a must in every member state, but certainly it would be ideal in many member states. So, you know, I will really conclude that like Romeo France, we would really like to see a swift adoption at interinstitutional level of our proposals for directive on the standards of equality bodies, because I'm happy to hear that you see there a huge potential. We do as well. And we really hope that it will be done very soon and will really achieve the expected results. And in the meantime, as I had the opportunity to explain, we will very closely follow up on the implementation of the National Roma Strategic Frameworks. Thank you very much for inviting me for making these concluding remarks.
Thank you, and goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye, thank you.